Hello and welcome to this video series on Gukesh. We started the video series with the introductory video, Free for All, when we analyzed Gukesh's most important win up to date, the win against Alireza Firouzja that gave him the path to the World Championship title match. That was the decisive game of the candidates tournament and one that I'm pretty sure Gukesh is very fond of. But now we are going to flash back to his early years, his first remarkable games, so we can chronologically go through his career from the beginning until the concluding moment before the World Championship match. Gukesh was born in May 2006 and he learned chess when he was about 6.5 years old. This is more or less normal for kids to pick up chess at this age. For example, Fischer also picked up chess when he was 6. But what is very impressive nowadays when it comes to chess prodigies is that they pick up chess at the age of 6, then double that time, and they're already grandmasters. And in Gukesh's case, double that one again, so he was 12 when he became a grandmaster, add 6 more years, and all of a sudden he's a World Championship title contender. Now this is truly mind-boggling. Needless to say, this makes him the youngest ever World Championship challenger. Now let's talk a little bit about Gukesh's background. He comes from Chennai, the same city where Vishy Anand was born, and currently Chennai is the epicenter of Indian chess. From the 85 Indian grandmasters today, 1/3 comes from the Tamil Nadu region in India, where Chennai is its biggest city. Gukesh's family has his father, whose occupation is a surgeon, and his mother is a microbiologist. Now, his father defines himself as a sports person, and he used to play cricket at the his university team, and he was always determined to introduce his son to some sort of a sports because he believed that sports are a very good way to develop discipline, to develop character, and also some other useful life skills. However, his first idea was actually to enroll his son into a chess academy. Actually, Gukesh picked up chess in school, and he got increasingly curious about the game at that time. We interviewed his father during the research for this series, and during this interview there is one word that often comes out of his mouth, and that word is the word curiosity. He says that it was his wife, actually Gukesh is his mother, who first noticed how curious he was about the game and how quickly fascinated he became by it. So she made this decision to provide him with more opportunities to be in touch with chess. And with this reason in mind, they enrolled him into the Vijay Anand Chess Academy, where he started getting coaching 1 hour, 3 times a week. Part of this coaching was also some puzzle assignments that they would give him for the week, but as it often would be the case, Gukesh would solve all of them in one day. Now, for the first 2 or 3 years, there was nothing remarkable about his chess, or there were not really any successes or results. But he did qualify for the World Youth Championship under 8, which was held in South Africa in September 2014. This was his first trip abroad, and he actually got a good result, finishing 5th. For example, his fellow Indians also did well. Leon Mendonca and Aditya Mittal, they finished 3rd and 6th respectively. Now, the real breakthrough came 1 year later, when he got to represent India at the Asian School Chess Championship, which was held in, guess where? Singapore. It was an under 9 category, and Gukesh was rated 1772 at the time, and surprisingly, he started with a draw against an unrated opponent in that tournament. Now, we normally know that starting with a draw in an open tournament is not the best of starts, and in fact his father also thought, well, probably this is going to be tough. However, turned out that he was wrong, because Gukesh went on to win all the remaining 8 games and win the championship. And in a way, if you keep in mind where this tournament took place, as I said, Singapore, and where the World Championship is taking place now, Singapore, it may be some sort of a coming full circle for Gukesh. Who knows, maybe it's destiny that he accomplished his first big result in Singapore when he was 9, and now playing the World Championship match at the very same place where he achieved that first big result. So, are we going to see a full circle in Gukesh's career or not? We will soon find out. Another important thing about this tournament in Singapore when he was 9 was that his father actually noticed how focused, calm and confident he was during the event, not getting nervous and all. And that is a characteristic that we can notice in Gukesh lately as well. He was his very composed, confident self at the candidates in Toronto. I personally got to see him live there in the playing hall at the Olympiad in Budapest, where he was just ice cold and playing like a machine. And most likely we will see the same Gukesh in Singapore, even though, as noted by none other than Magnus Carlsen, the World Championship match does have an intense pressure not seen anywhere else. But going back to that tournament in Singapore, that tournament was in fact the turning point in his career. After that big success, the family decided that it should invest more time and resources in his career. And in fact, his father started to take time off work so that he could accompany him 4 to 5 times a year to play events around the world. So, from that moment, Gukesh started more serious work on his chess. We will look at one representative, we could say, game from this period in his career, just to show you, to give you an idea what kind of a player Gukesh was when he was a kid. The game in particular that we're going to look at is a game from his victory in the Indian National Under-11 Championship, which was held in Pune. Gukesh won the tournament together with Savitha Shri, and the world famous Indian journalist Sagar Shah, you could even call him one of the fathers of Indian chess. What he said about them at the time was that something like, they are like diamonds, you know, they are raw, uncut, and I really want to catch them in their purest form at the beginning. So we have chosen a game from that event. It's a very fine victory against Pranith, an attacking game where Gukesh, with the black pieces, showed really good knowledge of the classics, implementing a classical sacrificial combination known from the games of the great masters of the past. The game is taken from the book From Boy to Man to Challenger, The Fiercest Battles of Gukesh D by Cyrus Lagdawala, and that was recently published by Elkin Ruby Publishing House. So now, take a rest, take a seat back, and enjoy the game. The game that we are going to take a look at was played against Pranith, and it took place in Pune in 2017 in the Indian Under-11 Championship. But we have to keep in mind that Gukesh was only 10 years of age at that time. So let's take a look at the game. d4, d5, c4, c6. Gukesh chooses the Slav defense, and after knight c3, knight f6, e3, e6, he marks his desire to play the Meran or the semi-Slav variation, depending on white's choice, after knight f3, knight b d7. So in this position, white has a major choice to make. Pranith chose the sharper move bishop d3, which leads to the Meran, as we shall see, whereas the move queen c2 after bishop d6, now bishop d3, leads to the so-called semi-Slav positions. After bishop d3, d takes c4, forces the bishop to move again. Bishop takes c4, b5, attacking the bishop on c4 and freeing the b7 square for the bishop, the black's light squared bishop. Bishop d3, a6. Black has three main moves in this position. a6 is one of them. The other two are bishop b7 and b4. All three quite popular. a6 was the move that none other than Vishy Anand chose with great success in his World Championship match against Vladimir Kramnik, where he won two spectacular games using the Meran. And here we see Gukesh playing the same opening as his great predecessor. In this position, Pranit chooses the move a4. That is a perfectly possible move, but not the main line. In fact, the main line rises after the move e4, c5, and now white has a choice whether to go for d5 or for e5. So these are the main options for white. But after a4, b4, knight e4, bishop b7, short castle c5, black opens the long diagonal for the bishop, attacking the knight on f6. And now white needs to decide what to do with the knight. It's possible to retreat it back to d2 or to take on f6, which is the more popular option. And in this position, all three recaptures of the knight are perfectly possible, and they have all been played. For example, knight f6 is perhaps the most natural recapture, and after dc5, bishop c5, queen e2, there was a famous game between Vladimir Kramnik and Garry Kasparov, played at the Zurich Rapid tournament dedicated to Viktor Korchnoi in the year 2001. So that was the year after Kramnik beat Kasparov in their World Championship match in London the year before. A game won by Kramnik with a very nice combination at the end. So that's one possible line to play, knight f6, and there is also possible to take with the pawn. Very sharp option. Black basically states that the king will stay in the center, as now it's not quite likely that the short castle will happen with this ruined somewhat pawn structure. But on the other hand, black opens the g file for the rook, which together with the bishop on b7 can be a potent combination against white's king. This, for example, was played by Anand's second, Rustam Kasimjanov, in his candidate's match against Boris Gelfand in 2007. So, like I said, all three recaptures are possible. Gukesh chooses the third one, capturing on f6 with the queen. And in this position, white plays a somewhat strange move, even if we take into consideration that this game was played between kids. But the move that defies the usual recommendations that are given to kids when playing openings, and that is never unnecessarily move with the same piece twice. The only reasonable explanation I can find for white's next move bishop e2 is that perhaps white was worried about the possible capture on f3, when eventually, even after the exchange of queens, white would be forced to double his pawns on the a file by eventually taking g takes f3. But that is not really what black wants to do, because the bishop on b7 is way too powerful and important to be exchanged for that knight on f3. So other moves like queen e2 or a5, let's say fixing this pawn on a6, or rook e1, supporting the central advance of e4, were all better than the move chosen, bishop e2. But okay, let's not be too harsh towards kids who were not really even teenagers at that time. And after bishop e2, we come to the first, I think, instructive moment in this game. And I think it's a moment that shows us a glimpse of Gukesh's character, confidence, and aggressive intentions when he is at the board. There's nothing wrong here for black just continuing development with something like bishop e7, short castle, and I'm pretty sure a lot of players, not only children but also adults, would automatically play this and have a good game. But Gukesh is probably built differently, and here he goes for the move g5. I'm pretty sure a lot of us would not even have this move cross our minds, but yeah, children are creative. And here we see him go g5 with the idea of g4, getting rid of that knight, and after bishop d6 then building up a very strong attack thanks to these bishops on the adjacent diagonals. White can't do much about g4, but what he can do is to try to complete development, which he does by playing the move b3 with the idea of bishop b2. It makes a lot of sense because placing the bishop on this long diagonal takes advantage of the move g5 because both black's queen and rook are lined up on that diagonal. Gukesh continues with the plan, g4, attacking the knight on f3, the knight drops back to d2, c takes d4, bishop b2, making sure that white regains the pawn, attacking the pawn on d4 twice, and the pawn cannot move because then the queen would be exposed, and now bishop d6. So this was black's idea. Now we have two beautiful bishops lined up against white's king. And now we come to the critical moment in the game, the decisive moment in the game, where white neglects or ignores even black's threats, and this costs him dearly. Whenever we have these bishops on these adjacent diagonals targeting g2 and h2 pawns, we should remember the classics. And the first player to play the combination that we are about to see was Emanuel Lasker in his classical world famous game against Bauer. And he was the first to sacrifice bishops on against these two pawns in front of the opponent's king. And then later this combination has been replicated in many games, and it's one that it's worth knowing. Another famous game, for example, is the game Tarrasch Nimzowitsch, where Nimzowitsch sacrificed these two bishops against his, let's say, principled opponent, Siegbert Tarrasch. Before showing the remainder of the game, it's worth noting that white's best here was to play the move g3 to blunt this dark squared bishop with these three pawns on dark squares, and for the time being the weakening on the long light diagonal cannot be taken advantage of for black because he cannot easily get the queen, for example, to c6 to threaten mate. I mean, it's pretty impossible to get it there, and the queen can't really get an access to any of these squares, which means that black cannot take advantage of the weakening of the long diagonal, and play will happen mostly in the center. So this would have been the best move for white, with a very, very unclear play ahead. But white played knight c4. He attacked the bishop, and here Gukesh unleashes the classical and well-known motive. And knowing how he developed, I'm pretty sure that even at the age of 10, Gukesh calculated the winning combination. I think at least some 8 or 9 moves ahead. You may be shocked by what I say, because for a 10-year-old to calculate that moves ahead may look a bit too much, but as you will see, the line is not very complicated. It's a straightforward line, it's a forcing line, and white doesn't have a choice to deviate from it, so it's not that easy to calculate that far ahead. And taking into consideration Gukesh's talent, I think this wasn't really a problem for him to calculate all the way, more or less until not the end of the game, but until the position where he was sure that he was winning. So for the first blow comes, boom, bishop takes h2, check. King takes h2, check on h4, king is forced back to g1, boom, bishop takes g2. Yeah, both bishops are sacrificed, the threat is queen h1 mate, and the idea is that after king takes g2, queen h3 check, king g1, g3 is the idea that makes the whole combination work. The threat is queen h2 mate, and after g3, white is forced to open the g file, and now the rook will join the attack with decisive effect. So Gukesh saw up to here, but he also continued the calculation. F takes g3, because what follows are the only moves. Queen takes g3 check, king h1, queen h3, king g1, and rook g8. This is what was necessary to see. Now the king cannot move. King f2, queen g3 is just mate in 1. And bishop g4 being the only move. Rook takes g4. Again, white is forced to give up the queen, because going to f2 again leads to mate. Rook g2, king e1, queen h4, rook f2, and queen takes f2 mate. And I can assure you again that Gukesh definitely saw all this. And probably he saw that after he won the queen, queen g4, king f2, he's winning. Maybe he stopped around here, maybe he continued, but this is not really that relevant, because what is important is that black has a winning position and being up in the material, but also in addition to that his attack also continues. And Gukesh continues forcefully, knight c5. Now the threats are knight d3 or knight d4. And knight d3 is even actually, it's a mate, and knight d4 is an additional threat. So white goes rook a d1 to stop knight d3, but d3 now. So now the pawn takes control over the e2 square, and the threat is knight e4 check, king e1, and queen e2 mate. So e4, trying to get the king to escape via the e3 square, but Gukesh is now very exact. Queen e2 check, king g1, and long castle. And this is a very beautiful moment if you look at it, because it's move 30, and we have black castling long on move 30 that late in the game, with the, again, decisive effect, because the rook is included in the attack. And after rook g1, mate will be practically inevitable. White cannot defend anymore. He played a few more moves. For example, in this position he played rook f7, and you would say, okay, rook f7, okay, white just take the rook with check, but Gukesh wants to be exact. He gives check on g8 first, forcing bishop g7 to cover the check, and now takes the rook. And the rest is actually quite elementary, because black has a full queen just for a bishop, and mate follows shortly. After king f2, queen e2, king g3, knight e4, king h4, rook h2, king g4, rook, queen g3, king h5, and queen g5 mate. So a pretty impressive tour de force, I would say, by Gukesh in this game, because it was a game played by a 10-year-old, but then you could sense the strength and the force of his moves, starting with the move g5, which was the signal for the attack, and then mercilessly killing off the game and taking advantage of white's only mistake in the game, which was knight c4, that allowed this beautiful classical combination. This also tells us that his, let's say, chess education by the age of 10 was already pretty good, to a pretty high standard, because after all, maybe it's not that easy to come up with the combination not knowing the motive, but I'm pretty sure that Gukesh knew the motive and executed it with confidence. What was necessary was only to calculate the consequences, which, as we saw, wasn't that problematic. So this was a 10-year-old Gukesh, impressive already. So what remains for me is to thank you for watching this video, and to invite you to check the next one, where we continue our journey along the games of Gukesh's career. See you in the next video.